Hey everyone! Tonight we're stepping into a small town just waking up, where a woman named Frankie Bishop runs an old-school appliance shop that's seen decades of change, but not the kind she's facing now. Picture this morning, sun barely lighting the sleepy streets of Chestnut Hill, steam rising from a chipped mug of tea, and one woman silently preparing for a storm she doesn't yet realize is forming. You might not survive this one. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing that. Now turn off the lights, maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Every morning, I wake up at 5:00 a.m., not because I have trouble sleeping. Sleep and I have always gotten along just fine, even now. At 63, I wake early because I like it. I like the stillness of Chestnut Hill before the world starts revving up. I like sipping strong tea while the sky turns from gray to pink, and I especially like opening Bishop's reliable appliances on Maple Avenue long before anyone else is out and about. That little shop has been mine for 32 years now. My husband, Alan, and I opened it just after our son Ethan turned 5. We were excited, young, ambitious, maybe even a bit foolish, but it worked. We made it work. Alan passed away 7 years ago. A heart attack, sudden and merciless. We just started talking about retirement, traveling the country in a vintage Airstream. He was gone before we even got a chance to test drive one. After Alan's funeral, Ethan came back home just for a bit, said he was suffocating here, said he needed to breathe again, then he vanished back to the city, working in insurance, popping up every once in a while for a holiday or birthday, mostly when he needed something. 4 years ago, he came back for good, jobless and newly married. Vanessa was sharp gorgeous, well-dressed, and as cold as my great-aunt's basement. From day one, I knew she didn't see me as family. She saw me as a hurdle, a quaint little woman in her 60s who stood between her and something bigger. I was polishing the display counter one morning when the bell over the front door jingled. Martha Langston walked in, clutching her tote bag and adjusting her oversized glasses. "Morning, Frances, early bird, as always," she smiled. I smiled back. "What's on the agenda today, Martha? Your coffee maker's still kicking." "Oh, it's going strong, best one I've ever had. But my toaster, well, it's not doing so hot." "You bought that toaster 12 years ago. It's earned its rest." "That's why I only come here. You don't stock junk." We walked over to the toaster aisle, and I started showing her the latest models. We chatted like we always do about her grandkids, about town politics, about whether or not the new mayor really knows what a budget looks like. This wasn't just sales. This was trust, familiarity. You know, one thing that gets lost in today's big box stores is memory. Those salespeople can quote specs off the tag, but they don't remember that you have arthritis in your hands and need knobs that turn easy. I do. That's the difference. By noon, I'd sold 2 vacuum cleaners, a microwave, and 3 toasters, including Martha's. Tuesdays aren't usually busy, but I wasn't complaining. At 12:01 on the dot, I closed the shop and crossed the street to Jenny's Cafe for lunch. I always get the same thing, pumpkin soup and sourdough toast. Jenny keeps my favorite table open, the one by the window where I can keep an eye on my store. Some habits never leave you, even after 30 years in business. I just settled in when a familiar silver sedan pulled up outside the shop. "Ethan." He pulled at the locked door, scowled, and reached for his phone. A second later, mine rang. I didn't even need to look at the screen. "Mom, where are you? The store's closed." "I'm at lunch. Honey, like always, noon to 1. "You actually close the store for lunch. How do you stay in business like that?" "Same way I've stayed in business for over 3 decades. He huffed. "Darcy and I are coming over tonight. Be home around 6. "I usually get home by 7. Why don't you come then?" "We can't adjust to your schedule." Mom, we have things to do." He hung up. Across the counter, Jenny brought over my soup and sat it down with a knowing look. "Ethan." I nodded. She shook her head. "He's coming over tonight, isn't he? Probably wants money again. After he sold Alan's coin collection." I sighed. "He's my only child, Jen. That doesn't mean you have to be his doormat." She wasn't wrong. I thought back to that coin collection. Alan had started it when we got married. Old pennies, buffalo nickels, rare quarters, though I kept them in a safe in the back room. Behind the original deed to the store, last year, I noticed they were gone. Ethan swore he'd just taken them to a friend to get appraised. Then I found the receipt, $4,800 from a local antique dealer stuck in his jacket, like a souvenir. Those coins were worth at least 5 times that. When I brought it up, he shrugged it off. "You weren't doing anything with them. I needed the money." Needed the money, always needing something. I finished my lunch in silence, heart heavy. When I got back to the store, I looked around the place at the microwaves, the washing machines, the catalogs stacked high in my office. I'd built this with Alan from scratch, our legacy. And Ethan? Ethan was circling it like a hawk. That night, at 6:03, the doorbell rang. Ethan stood there, tall and balding like his father, but with none of Alan's warmth. Vanessa stood behind him, manicured to perfection, lips curled into a forced smile. "Hi, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. His cologne was sharp, too sharp. "We won't stay long. We've got dinner plans at 8. I stepped aside to let them in. "I just finished dinner. Want tea?" "No time," Vanessa said, brushing past me into the living room. She wrinkled her nose at my cozy armchairs. "We need to talk," Ethan said. "It's serious, about your future." My stomach tightened. I knew that tone, the same one he used when he sold the coins, and I had a feeling whatever he was about to say was going to be worse. Ethan took a seat across from me, his hands folded like he was hosting some kind of business negotiation. Vanessa sat beside him with her legs crossed and her eyes locked on the bookshelf behind me, as if everything in my home was beneath her attention. "Mom," Ethan began, "you're still running that store all by yourself. That's not sustainable." Sustainable for who I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "For you, obviously. You're 63, lifting boxes, keeping books, dealing with suppliers. That's a lot of work for someone your age." "I manage just fine." "For now," he said with a sigh. "But what about in a year or 2? Time doesn't move backward. Mom, I'm aware." Vanessa let out a theatrical sigh, as if this whole conversation bored her to death. "Frankie, we're worried about you. All your money is tied up in that store. If something happened to you, what then?" "I've got savings, insurance, a will." "Which we haven't seen," Ethan said. And that was the first real slip. The air changed. "What exactly are you getting at?" I asked. Ethan leaned forward, his voice softening into that manipulative tone he used when he was 12 and trying to stay up late. "We want to help you. Mom, take the weight off your shoulders. Make sure everything's managed correctly." Managed. "I think you should sign a power of attorney, just financial stuff," he said quickly. "I'd make sure your bills are paid, your taxes handled, and your money invested smartly." "You're not an accountant, Ethan." "I've worked in finance," he snapped. "I know what I'm doing." Vanessa added, "With the cost of elder scams these days, wouldn't it be safer to have your son keeping an eye on things?" Oh, so now I was just a target with a checkbook. I folded my hands in my lap. "I'll think about it." Ethan blinked. "Really?" "Yes, I said I'd think about it." Vanessa shot him a quick look, then glanced at her watch. "We've got to go. Reservations." Ethan stood and kissed my cheek again, lingering just a second too long. "I promise. It's for your own good, Mom." I closed the door after them and leaned against it, heart thudding. For a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe, not because of fear, because of anger, quiet, slow-burning anger. My own son saw me as a liability, and his wife saw me as a walking wallet. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around me and a thermos of tea in my lap, thinking. A few years ago, I'd have brushed it off, told myself they meant well, but not now, not after the coin collection, not after the disappearing appliances, not after all the borrowed items that never made it back. By morning, I'd made up my mind. After closing the shop at 500 the next day, I drove to see my old friend, Hank Ryder. He's been a lawyer in Chestnut Hill longer than anyone, and he handled our affairs when Alan passed. "Haven't seen you in a while. Frankie," he said as I sat down in the worn leather chair across from his desk. "I need to draw up a power of attorney. I told him." Hank raised a brow. "You sure about that?" "No," I admitted, "but I need to know what my son is really after." We discussed options, a limited POA with safeguards, spending limits, alerts, everything. But in the end, I told him to make it a standard one. Simple and broad. If he's going to abuse it, I said, I want to catch him in the act. Hank gave me a long look. "You always were the cautious type. You sure you're ready for this?" "Never been more ready." The next day, I called Ethan and told him I'd agreed to his proposal. "You won't regret it." "Mom," he said, clearly thrilled. "I'll swing by with the paperwork tomorrow." And just like that, the trap was set. That night, I dusted off a box from the top shelf of my closet. Inside were Alan's journals, our business ledgers from the early days, and a small voice recorder I hadn't used in years. I tested it. Still worked fine. The next afternoon, Ethan came by with a folder in hand. He'd dressed nicer than usual, probably to look more professional. No Vanessa in sight, which told me he didn't want her spooking me with her obvious disdain. "It's all ready," he said, placing the folder on the kitchen table, just a few signatures. I opened the folder slowly, flipping through the pages. I already knew what they said. Hank had explained it all, but I pretended to examine them carefully anyway. "And what exactly do you plan to do with this access?" I asked. "Like I said, streamline your finances. Maybe reinvest some capital, help modernize the store." "Modernize?" "Yeah, like upgrade the interior. Maybe start an online store. Vanessa has great ideas." I looked up. "Are you planning to sell it?" "What? No, of course not," he said too fast. "Just thinking long term." I signed the papers. He snatched them up quickly, like he was afraid I'd change my mind. "You won't regret this." "Mom," he said again, flashing that smile that used to charm every teacher at his school. When he left, I went back to my store and sat behind the counter for a long time, staring at the picture of Alan that sat beside the register. "Where are you?" "Alan," I whispered, "because I could use your help now." The next morning, I installed the bank's notification app on my phone, instant alerts for every transaction. Hank helped me set it up so Ethan wouldn't know. For a week, everything was quiet. Ethan called once or twice to ask about inventory, my health, the weather, casual, pleasant. Then, on a slow Saturday afternoon, the alert buzzed on my phone. "Transfer request $15,000 to Ethan Bishop, pending confirmation." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The note said, "Store renovation, urgent." Renovation. We hadn't spoken about any renovations. I hadn't seen a single supplier contract, estimate, or blueprint, and $15,000. That wasn't pocket change. I called the bank immediately. "Reject it," I said. "I didn't authorize that transaction." "Would you like us to notify Mr. Bishop?" "No," I said. "I'll handle it myself." That night, my phone rang again. "Ethan." "Hey, Mom, weird thing, bank rejected the transfer." "Oh." "I told you I needed the money for renovations." "You didn't tell me it was $15,000. Come on, Mom, don't make this difficult. You said I could manage things. Managing doesn't mean raiding the account. He was quiet for a second. Then, in a clipped voice, he said, "Fine, I'll keep you posted next time." "Please do." We hung up. I stared at the silent phone, the knot in my chest tightening. He wasn't planning a renovation. He was planning something else entirely. The Monday after that little incident, I called Hank and told him everything: the attempted transfer, the fake renovation claim, Ethan's reaction. He was quiet for a long moment before asking, "Frankie, you sure you want to keep this game going? Because this isn't just about money anymore. This is prelude to theft territory." "I know," I said, "but I need to understand just how far he's willing to go." Hank sighed. "All right then, I'll help you keep the walls up while you watch the show." By Thursday, things were oddly peaceful. Ethan hadn't called or texted, which almost worried me more. When the enemy retreats, it's usually to reload. That night, just before closing, the bell above the store door jingled. I looked up, and there she was, Vanessa, alone. Now that was unusual. Her heels clacked across the tile floor like she was walking into a courtroom. "Hi, Frankie," she said in that honey over ice tone. "Thought I'd stop in and get your opinion." "My opinion?" "Anniversary's coming up, and Ethan wants to get me something nice. A coffee machine, maybe." I already knew where this was going. She pointed to the most expensive model we had, sleek chrome, and absolutely overkill. "How much?" $480, I said, "well, worth every penny." "I'll take it," she chirped. "Just put it on Ethan's tab." I paused. If it's a gift from Ethan, shouldn't he be the one buying it? She waved her manicured hand in the air. "Oh, don't be old-fashioned. Frankie, you gave Ethan control of the finances. Our money is family money now. He already approved it." I packed up the machine in silence, my gut twisting like a rag. This was it, the test, the bait. "All right," I said calmly. "I'll mark it as a gift from the two of you." She gave me a dazzling fake smile and added, "By the way, since Ethan's handling your finances, maybe you should give us a key to the store, just in case something happens. We'd hate for your business to suffer if you were, say, under the weather." Now it was obvious. They weren't just sniffing around the money. They were positioning themselves to take everything. "Patty has a key," I said smoothly. "She's 3 blocks away." Vanessa's smile didn't budge, but her eyes did. Frost hardened in her pupils. Sure, but we're family." After she left, I immediately called the bank and doubled security on my account. Multi-factor authentication, transaction caps, even verbal PIN phrases, everything short of laser beams. Then I sat at the counter and stared into space for a good 20 minutes, trying to untangle the knots inside my chest. Was it grief, anger, shame? All three, probably. That coffee machine wasn't just a transaction, it was a message. That night at home, I dusted off the safe in my closet and pulled out the deed to the store. I scanned it line by line, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything crucial. And there it was. The title wasn't in my name. It was under Bishop Hardware and Appliance Co., the LLC Alan and I had set up 32 years ago. Guess who was the sole active officer listed? Me. Only me. Which meant Ethan had zero authority over the real estate. He couldn't sell it, rent it, or touch it without my signature. And he didn't know that. I held the papers in my lap, relief washing over me like a warm bath. It gave me just enough breathing room to do what needed to be done next. The next day, I took a slow walk around downtown Chestnut Hill. I hadn't strolled Main Street in weeks. Spring was finally cracking open the cold, and daffodils poked up defiantly near the library lawn. But I wasn't out for fresh air. I walked past the bank, and guess whose car was parked outside? Ethan's silver sedan. It was 12:50 p.m. on a Friday. He should have been at work. I slipped into the bank and stayed tucked behind one of those promotional cardboard displays showing smiling retirees. From there, I had a clear line of sight. There they were, Ethan and Vanessa, standing at the counter, talking to Peter, the same banker who had helped Alan and me for over 2 decades. Peter was shaking his head. Ethan's arms were folded. Vanessa looked like she was chewing on the air between them. Then Peter pulled out some paperwork and after a few tense moments, walked off toward the vault. That's when Vanessa started bouncing slightly, like a kid on Christmas morning. I swear I saw her licking her lips. Peter returned with stacks of money, crisp, bundled, rubber-banded, cash. My pulse drummed in my ears. They were taking out cash, and not a little. That stack had weight. I ducked low as they turned to leave. They walked right past me, bag of cash in Vanessa's arms, Ethan's hand on her back like a shepherd leading his prize ewe out of the pasture. I counted to 30, then approached the counter. "Peter," I said, calm as lake water on a windless morning. He nearly jumped. "Mrs. Bishop, what a surprise." "Tell me, Peter," I said, lowering my voice. "Did my son just withdraw money from my account?" He hesitated, the color draining from his face. "You know I can't discuss other clients." "I'm not asking about other clients. I'm asking about my own account." He looked around. "Let's step into the office." Inside, I shut the door behind us. "Peter," I said, "how much?" He looked miserable. $75,000, almost your entire primary account. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. "And you let him." "He had a notarized power of attorney that removes withdrawal limits," Peter said helplessly, "and a signed doctor's note." That stopped me cold. "What doctor's note?" "From Dr. Gallagher, stating you had signs of cognitive decline." "That's a lie." "I believe you," he said. "I tried to call, but Ethan said you were resting." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly. Peter offered to file a report. I told him to wait. Because I had a better idea. As I left the bank, I saw Ethan and Vanessa duck into Marco's bistro, a few doors down. I followed. And I sat 2 tables over behind a column and listened. I recorded everything. "Once we get guardianship," Vanessa said, "we can sell the store, move to Sarasota, and be done with this place." Ethan nodded. "Suncrest Care will take her. Insurance covers most of it. The rest, well, she won't need it." I clutched the table edge so hard my knuckles went white. "I've already lined up a realtor," Ethan said, "and the doctor is coming to her house next week for a so-called checkup. He'll sign the papers. She'll be out of the way." Vanessa giggled. "Let's just hope she doesn't suddenly get wise." I didn't flinch. But I was wise now, and they were going to find out just how much. I spent that night in a storm of thoughts, pacing the living room with my phone in one hand and the tiny tape recorder in the other. The words I'd recorded at Marco's bistro echoed in my head. "She'll be out of the way. Guardianship. She won't need it." My stomach turned every time Vanessa's smug little laugh rang through the audio file. At 3:17 a.m., I made a decision. No more waiting, no more observing. It was time to start laying the bricks of my own defense quietly, methodically, and with absolute precision. The next morning, I called Hank from a prepaid phone I'd picked up the week before. It was a throwback to my days working at the appliance repair counter when we dealt with warranty scams. Rule number 1, always have a line they don't know about. "Frankie," Hank said, voice thick with sleep. "It's 6:45 in the morning. This better not be about a toaster." "It's bigger than a toaster. Hank, meet me at the Nest in 30 minutes. He groaned, but he came. The Nest was a tucked-away cafe near the edge of Chestnut Hill, where the booths were cozy and the owner, Elena, never asked questions. I got us a corner seat and 2 strong coffees. When Hank arrived, I slid the tape recorder across the table and hit play. His face hardened with every word. When the recording ended, he sat back, blew out a long breath, and whispered, "They're going to lock you up to steal your life, Frankie." I'm aware. He looked at me for a long time. "So what's the plan?" "We fight, and we don't make a single mistake." We spent the next 2 hours sketching out everything. First step, revoke the power of attorney, but I couldn't do that publicly yet. If Ethan and Vanessa got wind I was onto them, they'd accelerate everything. So I needed to play along at least until I had a replacement document in place. Second step, legally protect everything Ethan didn't know about. That included the storefront deed still held under Bishop Hardware and Appliance Co. He thought he had his hands on the crown jewel, but all he'd grabbed were loose pearls. Third, blow up the bridge after I'd crossed it. The plan needed to be bulletproof, airtight, and above all, legal. I met with Hank again that afternoon, this time with notarized documents in hand. We drafted a new will. Ethan was cut out entirely. My house would go to the local animal shelter, the one Alan and I donated to every Christmas. The store, as I'd already begun planning, would go to Patty, in full. She didn't know it yet, but I had a hunch she'd rise to the occasion. That evening, I called Patty and asked if she could stop by the store early the next morning. She agreed, sounding slightly concerned. "Is everything okay, Frankie?" I hesitated. "Not exactly, but I'm handling it." We met in the quiet of the store at 7 a.m., before the sun had fully risen. I poured us both tea and locked the front door. "I'm going to ask you a strange question. Patty," I began, "do you love this store?" She blinked, more than you can imagine. "Would you run it if I couldn't?" "Of course. But, Frankie, why are you asking?" "I might need someone to step in soon. Temporarily or long term, I don't know. But I want it to be you." Her eyes filled with tears. "What's going on?" I smiled gently. "Let's just say the people I used to trust aren't who I thought they were." Patty sat straight up. "Ethan." I nodded. "He's trying to have me declared incompetent, steal everything I built, sell this store, ship me off to Suncrest." She covered her mouth, horrified. "No." "Yes. But don't worry. I'm working with Hank. I've started recording everything, and I'm going to need you to help run things while I fight back." Patty squeezed my hand. "I'm in. Whatever you need." That same day, I visited the doctor who'd been treating me for years, Karen Liu. I told her everything and asked if she'd be willing to do a cognitive assessment and provide a letter certifying my mental fitness. She agreed without hesitation. "This isn't the first time I've seen something like this," she said, frowning. "It's always the people you trust the most." Back home, I opened my safe and pulled out the cash I'd quietly stashed over the past decade. The amount wasn't huge, just under $18 to $1,000, but it was more than enough for what I had planned next. I didn't sleep much that night. My body was tired, but my brain raced like a train with no brakes. The fear, the betrayal, the rage, it all fueled me. The next day was Sunday. I told Patty I'd be in late and spent the morning packing a suitcase just in case I had to disappear quickly. A toothbrush, some clothes, old photographs, a burner phone, a legal file with all documents Hank and I had prepared, and copies of the bank records Peter had emailed me on the sly. At 3:00 p.m., Ethan called. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. Just checking in. That new doctor's appointment I mentioned, it's scheduled for Tuesday at 10. Dr. Nielsen, super nice guy, geriatric specialist. Oh, that's soon." "Yeah, he had a cancellation. Worked out great." "I bet it did." "All right, I'll be ready." "Great. Vanessa and I will pick you up at 9:30. The rest of the call was small talk, but every word felt like it was dipped in poison. That night, I baked a pie. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but there's something grounding about flour, butter, and sugar. The act of creation when someone's trying to tear your life apart. That's its own kind of rebellion. I sat on my porch with a slice and watched the sun dip behind the elms, remembering when Alan used to come home dusty from the warehouse, smelling like metal and laundry detergent. He'd kiss me on the cheek, and we'd share a quiet dinner, talking about nothing and everything. He would have fought like hell to protect me. Now it was my turn to fight for myself. Tuesday arrived dressed in disguise, just like Ethan and Vanessa. The sun was shining, birds chirped, and Chestnut Hill looked as peaceful as ever. But underneath it all, I could feel the storm brewing. I'd spent the morning preparing, not just brushing my hair and putting on a crisp blouse, but mentally rehearsing. I kept my responses slow but clear, calm, even if my stomach was doing cartwheels. At 9:25 sharp, Ethan's silver SUV rolled up to the curb. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, her sunglasses bigger than her empathy. I locked the front door, stepped outside with my purse, and smiled like I didn't know a thing. "Morning, Mom," Ethan said, hopping out to open the door like the perfect son. "Morning," I said, sliding in. Vanessa barely acknowledged me. "We're on a tight schedule," she muttered, tapping her phone. The clinic was 15 minutes away, nestled between a dentist's office and a yoga studio. It looked legit from the outside. Inside, it smelled like eucalyptus and over-cleaned carpet. Dr. Nielsen was a soft-spoken man with a polished-look beard trimmed, tie neat, too smooth. He ushered me into a small office and gestured to the chair across from him. Ethan and Vanessa sat behind me. I could feel their eyes drilling into the back of my head. "So, Mrs. Bennett," Dr. Nielsen began, "we're just going to do a simple evaluation today. Nothing invasive, a few memory checks, some questions about your daily life." "Of course," I said, smiling. The questions were simple until they weren't. "What did you have for breakfast today?" "Scrambled eggs, toast, and a cup of Irish breakfast tea." "What's today's date?" "April 16th. "And can you tell me who the president is?" "Still that guy with the sunglasses memes. President Lawson?" He chuckled politely. "Excellent. Now, tell me how you balance your checkbook." "I do it online. Every Sunday evening, I use a spreadsheet." He paused. "Online?" "Yes. Been doing it for 8 years now." From behind me, I heard Vanessa shift in her seat. "Do you ever find yourself confused about your surroundings?" "Only when I'm in modern art museums." Another pause. He scribbled something. "Do you ever forget how to get home?" "Only when my GPS tries to take me through 4 different neighborhoods to get to the grocery store." I could feel Ethan's frustration rising. His foot tapped. His breathing got shallow. "Dr. Nielsen continued, but something had shifted. His voice faltered. The questions got more vague. Finally, he closed his notebook. "Well, Mrs. Bennett, you seem to be doing quite well today." "Thank you," I said sweetly. "It's the crossword puzzles. They keep me sharp." Ethan forced a smile. "Doc, do you think there could be early signs of deterioration? You know, she was a little confused last week." Nielsen nodded uncertainly. "I'll have to review my notes and compare them to standard cognitive metrics." Translation: "You didn't get what you came for." We left in awkward silence. Vanessa didn't say a word until we got back into the car. She was being performative. She hissed. "I'm sorry," I said, turning around in the passenger seat. "I'm right here." Vanessa waved a hand. "You know what I mean." Ethan let out a breath. "Let's not talk about this now." "Oh, let's," I said, smiling. "In fact, let's stop by the store. I want to pick up something for dinner. My treat." Ethan glanced at me, suspicion flashing in his eyes. "Sure." We drove in silence to Bennett's Reliable Hardware, the store Ethan once said belonged in a history museum. As we pulled up, I noticed Patty standing at the front window with a clipboard. I gave her a tiny wave. Inside, I walked straight to the counter and flipped the open sign to closed. Mom, Ethan said, confused. I ignored him and turned to Patty. "You remember Ethan and Vanessa?" Patty nodded curtly. I'd like you to grab the file from the back, the blue one. You know the one." She disappeared into the back room. Ethan crossed his arms. "What's going on?" Vanessa leaned against the display for blenders. This better not be another guilt trip. "No," I said, smiling. "This is a lesson in accountability." Patty returned with the file. I opened it, pulled out a copy of my revoked power of attorney, notarized and dated from last Friday, and handed it to Ethan. "What's this?" "Me taking back control." He flipped through the pages, his face draining of color. "I don't think this is..." Legal Hank drafted it. The same Hank who's been our family lawyer for decades. The same one who filed a complaint to the DA this morning, complete with bank records, recorded conversations, and proof of forged documents. Vanessa stepped forward. "You're bluffing." "I'm not." I laid out another document. "This is a restraining order, effective immediately. You're not to come within 300 feet of me or my property. That includes this store." "You've gone insane," Ethan barked. "No," I said, my voice low but firm. "I've gone prepared." The bell above the door jingled. Right on cue, Officer Daniels from Chestnut Hill PD stepped inside. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, tipping his hat. "Yes," I replied calmly. "These are the individuals named in the order." Ethan's face twisted. "You can't be serious." "I am, and I'm very tired of being underestimated." Daniels approached them. "I'm going to need both of you to come with me. You're not under arrest yet, but we need to ask you some questions." Vanessa's manicured hands trembled. Ethan looked like a child who just realized the adult in the room wasn't buying his story anymore. They were escorted out, and the silence they left behind felt like a second sunrise. Patty turned to me, mouth slightly open. "You really did it." I nodded slowly. "I did, but it's not over." Now comes the hard part. The store was quiet after they left, still, unnaturally still. I stood there behind the counter, hand resting on the glass, looking out the window as Officer Daniels' cruiser disappeared down Main Street with Ethan and Vanessa in the back. Patty finally broke the silence. "Do you want me to lock up?" "No," I said. "Let's keep it open a bit longer." And just like that, life snapped back into motion. A customer came in about 10 minutes later, a man named Mr. Tilley, who'd been buying snowblowers and socket wrenches from us since '94. He wanted to return a leaf blower that had a faulty handle. I handled it like it was any other day, because in some ways it still was. Except everything had changed. When the afternoon quieted down again, I walked to the back room and sat in the little office I once shared with my late husband, Russell. I closed the door, not to hide, but to gather myself. I pulled out the file folder, the one with all the important papers, and began sorting through the copies. My lawyer, Hank, had already submitted the formal complaint to the district attorney. Between the audio recordings, the forged power of attorney, and the bank statements Peter had helped us gather, we had more than enough to start legal proceedings. Still, I wasn't naive. This was going to be long, slow, and exhausting. And I wasn't getting any younger. The next morning, I woke to a knock on the door, Hank himself, holding a box of donuts and 2 coffees. He was a lean man in his early 70s, still sharp as a nail and stubborn as a mule. "Figured you'd need fuel," he said. I poured us both cups of fresh coffee, mine with a splash of oat milk, and his black as sin, and we sat at my kitchen table going through the timeline. "Expect their lawyer to file a motion to dismiss," he said between bites. "They'll argue family misunderstanding, maybe even elder confusion." I snorted. "Let them. I've got a better memory than most of the town council." "That's what I told the prosecutor," he smiled. "They're pursuing felony charges, fraud, forgery, and financial elder abuse. The forged medical report is the nail in the coffin." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Do you think he'll go to prison?" Hank's expression softened. "That's not up to us. But yes, there's a good chance." I didn't say anything for a moment. Instead, I reached for the notepad I kept by the phone and jotted something down. "You okay?" he asked gently. "No," I said, "but I'm ready." And that's when the phone rang. It was Officer Daniels. "Mrs. Bennett, Ethan Thorne has been released on bail. Vanessa as well." "Already?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, ma'am, but a protective order remains in place. They are not to contact you." "Thank you, officer." I hung up slowly. Hank was watching me. "How do you want to handle it?" "I want to stay calm," I said, "but I'm going to double lock the shop, and I want security cameras installed by the end of the week." He nodded. That afternoon, I had Patty order a small but effective security system online. She was more than happy to help. "Don't worry, Mrs. Bennett, we've got this. You built this place, you'll protect it." By Thursday, the cameras were up, one above the door, one watching the counter, and another out back. And then Friday came. It was quiet at first. I opened the store like usual, served Mrs. Ledbetter a new toaster oven, helped Curtis Henley find the right screwdriver set for his boat, even managed to have lunch without checking my phone 20 times. Until around 3 p.m. That's when Vanessa walked in. Not Ethan, just her. She was wearing oversized sunglasses again, a long trench coat that didn't match the weather, and that same fake smile she always used when trying to seem polite. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly, holding her hands up. Patty emerged from the back room like a hawk circling. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know," Vanessa said, stepping carefully inside the front door. "But I needed to say something. Just 2 minutes, please." I nodded at Patty, who reluctantly stepped back into the office. Vanessa stepped up to the counter, her eyes darting between me and the door. "Look, Winifred, I just wanted to say I didn't know everything Ethan was doing." I raised an eyebrow. "You were there when he forged the medical report." Her lips tightened. That was his idea. I just signed off. I didn't realize how serious it would get. "You didn't realize claiming I had dementia and stealing my money was serious. I mean, I didn't think you'd take it this far." I leaned forward. "You mean you didn't think I'd fight back?" She hesitated. "You thought I'd roll over, sign away my store, and disappear into a retirement home while you and my son turned my life's work into a down payment on a beach house." Her shoulders stiffened. "We had plans." "So did I." There was a long pause. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator behind the counter and the soft buzz of the overhead lights. "I just wanted to say sorry," she said, quieter now, "for my part in all of it." I stared at her. And then, for the first time, I saw something, maybe guilt, maybe shame, or maybe just the cold realization that the gravy train had stopped running. "I don't forgive you," I said calmly, "but thank you for saying it." She nodded once and turned toward the door. "And Vanessa," I added. She paused. "If I ever see you in here again, I'll press charges. You are not welcome in my store." She left without another word. When the bell above the door stopped jingling, Patty stepped back out. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "She won't be back." That night, I poured a glass of Merlot, sat on my porch, and listened to the wind rustling through the oaks. I felt something new. Not peace exactly, but the beginning of it, like the air right before dawn. I wasn't done fighting, but I was no longer afraid. Saturday mornings used to be my favorite, always a slow, warm start, the kind where you sip coffee on the porch and listen to the town stretching awake. But that Saturday, I was up at 5 a.m., nerves buzzing like a light bulb on its last filament. Ethan's court date was set for the following week, and although I'd filed all the paperwork, secured a restraining order, and had Hank handling the legal fight, I still couldn't sit still. So I cleaned, Windexed every pane in the storefront, reorganized the screwdriver display, even scrubbed the grout between the tiles in the back room. Patty showed up around 8:30 and gave me a look like I'd rearranged the laws of physics. "Everything okay, Winifred?" she asked, holding a box of donuts. "Nope," I said, "but the floors never looked better." She snorted and handed me a cruller. Well, at least sugar still works the same. We opened the shop, and for a little while, it was business as usual. I rang up a toaster, helped a couple shop for an upright freezer, and even managed to make a few folks laugh, mostly by telling them how my first microwave caught fire because I didn't realize foil was a no-no. By noon, I'd nearly convinced myself that things might calm down. And then a delivery truck pulled up. I hadn't ordered anything. 2 men stepped out in matching polos and began unloading boxes, 6 massive crates marked fixtures and display shelves. Patty and I exchanged a look. I walked outside. "Excuse me, who signed for this order?" One of them handed me a clipboard. It says the owner, Ethan Thorne. The name made me wince. There's been a mistake. Ethan doesn't have the authority to order anything here. The man shrugged. "We were told to drop it off today, paid in full." "By whom?" "Same guy. Said it was part of the new renovation." I almost laughed. Ethan was still trying to manipulate the narrative even from the outside. "Leave it here," I said, "but I'm not signing anything." They nodded and placed the boxes by the side entrance. Inside, I sat down behind the counter and called Hank. "He's trying to create paper trails," I said, trying to make it look like we were remodeling all along. That could explain the earlier attempt to withdraw funds. Hank agreed. He's laying groundwork to claim this was all a business dispute. He really thinks he's that clever, which means he's desperate. The next day was Sunday, my one day off. I took a long walk around the lake, boots crunching against fallen leaves, my scarf pulled tight. The water glinted silver, ducks moving in lazy zigzags across the surface. You'd never know, standing there, that someone you loved had tried to erase you. When I got back, there was a letter on my doorstep. No stamp, no envelope, just folded in half with my name written across it. "Mom, this is all getting out of hand. You're making this into a public scandal that doesn't need to happen. Can't we just sit down and talk? No lawyers, no cops, no drama, just you and me. One conversation. I'll come by Monday night, 7 p.m. Please just hear me out. Ethan." It didn't feel like an apology. It felt like a trap. I called Hank and read him the letter. "You want me there?" "No," I said, "but I'll keep my recorder on." Monday came. I spent the day alternating between angry cleaning and mentally preparing to face my son again. I didn't want this meeting, but part of me needed it. Needed to see if anything human remained in him. At 6:58 p.m., a car pulled up. Not his usual silver sedan. This was a rental. Cheap, basic. I suppose his assets were freezing up already. Ethan stepped out alone. "No, Vanessa." His hair looked thinner, face more gaunt, like life had already started collecting debts from him. He knocked once, and I opened the door. "Come in." He entered slowly, glancing around like the house had grown thorns. "You look good," he said, forcing a smile. "I feel strong," I replied. "Would you like tea?" He nodded. We sat in the living room, the same place we had when he asked for power of attorney. That version of me had still been holding out hope. This version, she was watching. He took a sip and sighed. "Look, Mom, I didn't mean for any of this to go this far. I thought I was helping." Helping, I tilted my head. "I just wanted you to rest, enjoy life, not work yourself to death. So you forged a medical report, cleaned out my account, tried to have me declared incompetent." His jaw clenched. "That wasn't the plan. Vanessa, push things." I stared at him. "Don't you dare blame her alone. I heard everything. In the restaurant, the bank, I have recordings." His eyes went wide, then narrowed. "You were spying." "No, I was surviving." A beat of silence stretched between us. "I miss Dad," he said quietly. He never doubted me. "Russell would be ashamed of you," I said softly, "not because you failed, but because you lied. And you kept lying." He looked down at his tea. "You still have time, Ethan," I added, "to do the right thing, to tell the truth in court, to stop running." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't undo what's done, but you can start owning it." He stood. "I should go." "I think that's best." As he stepped toward the door, he turned. "Mom." "Yes." "I thought the store meant more to you than me." That line hit harder than I expected, but I didn't flinch. "It didn't, but you gave me no choice." He nodded once, then left. The door closed behind him with a gentle click. I sat back down, not crying, not shaking, just breathing. Sometimes, being a mother means accepting that you cannot save someone from themselves. But you can still save yourself. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise again. You'd think I'd be exhausted by now. But no. My body was energized, like it finally understood what it meant to reclaim something that had been slowly slipping away for years. My peace, my independence, my name. I sat in the kitchen with a steaming mug of peppermint tea and stared at the empty chair across from me. Russell used to sit there every morning with a crossword humming under his breath while I made breakfast. I missed that rhythm. But strangely, I didn't feel alone. Not anymore. That chair, that silence, it felt like presence now, not absence. I was due at Hank's office by 10, sharp. He had just received a copy of the bank's internal report, and the hearing was approaching quickly. But before I could even lace up my shoes, my phone buzzed. Block number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello!" A pause, then a raspy voice. "Mrs. Prescott. This is Officer Langston from Hueytown Correctional. Your son Ethan asked to speak with you." I felt my pulse thump once hard at my temple. "Put him on." A crackle, then his voice, quiet and strained. "Hi, Mom?" "Ethan, they're moving me today. Different holding facility closer to Birmingham." "I see." Another pause. I wanted to say sorry. I closed my eyes. He went on. "I know words aren't enough. I know what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know I think about it every minute." I didn't respond. I miss Dad. Every day. Maybe if he were still here, I wouldn't have ended up like this. That old habit deflecting blame crept back into his voice. But then he added, "But I made the choices. I see that now. I interrupted gently. "Ethan, I hope someday you find the courage to live with truth. That's the only way back from this." He was quiet. "Goodbye, Ethan." I hung up. The strange thing was I didn't feel triumphant or even angry. I felt still, like I'd finally closed a door that had needed closing for a long, time. At Hank's office, things moved quickly. He handed me a printout of the restitution documents. "Looks like we'll recover most of the stolen funds within 6 months," he said, "thanks to the court's ruling and the escrow freeze." "What about the forged medical report?" Dr. Wilson's full confession sealed that. Ethan and Vanessa both face additional charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, but we're not here just to talk lawsuits. Winifred. "Oh," he smiled. "We need to talk about your store's future." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "Patty called me this morning. She said the new online storefront is booming, orders from 3 neighboring counties, and she's hired a part-time helper, Corey. Young guy, bright, just graduated tech school. She says he's a mini Russell in the making." I chuckled. High praise. She's got ideas too, workshops for senior citizens on using home tech, appliance care seminars, even a pop-up booth at the farmer's market. Looks like she's serious about carrying the torch. She is, Hank said, and with your blessing, she wants to rebrand the shop a bit. I raised an eyebrow. Rebrand? Not change the mission, just evolve the name. Prescott & Co. She says you'll always be the & Co. part. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that hadn't come from me in weeks. I like it. I really do. We finalized a few more legal documents that morning, updating the LLC details, transferring 50% ownership to Patty with a succession clause, just like I'd planned. As I stepped outside, the autumn sun hit my face, and I paused on the curb to take it in. There was a calmness settling over Hueytown that I hadn't noticed before. Maybe it had always been there, and I'd just been too worried, too wounded to feel it. I headed straight for the shop. When I walked in, Patty was bent over a pile of boxes, scanning UPC codes into the system. "Hey, boss," she grinned. "I didn't expect you until later. Just needed to see the place." She set the scanner down and wiped her hands. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay." I glanced around the room. New signage, a bright little shelf marked Smart Living, even a cozy corner with a coffee machine and 2 chairs, an idea I'd once had but never acted on. "I hear you want to call it Prescott & Co." Her eyes lit up. "You're not mad." "I'm proud." Patty beamed. "Then I guess it's official." Later that afternoon, I sat in that little coffee corner with a cup of decaf, watching customers browse while Corey helped an elderly gentleman program his new voice-activated microwave. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was legacy, and it was safe. That night, I packed a small suitcase. Not for an escape, but for a beginning. I'd booked a weekend cabin in the Smoky Mountains. Just me, a stack of old journals, and the fresh forest air. It was time to start writing things down, my story, my memories, my lessons, not to publish, not to sell. Just so I wouldn't forget who I was and how I found my way back. As I zipped up the suitcase, I walked past the hallway mirror. For the first time in a while, I stopped and looked at her. Winifred Prescott. Shop owner. Mother. Survivor. And still, somehow, dreamer. When I pulled into the gravel driveway of the cabin, the trees greeted me like old friends. Their leaves were just beginning to shift into that golden-orange glow of October, and the breeze carried a quiet that wrapped around you like a quilt. There were no humming refrigerators, no customer bells, no banking apps chirping notifications, just bird song and the soft creak of wood settling. It had been years since I'd been anywhere completely alone, the kind of alone that isn't lonely, just simple, honest. The cabin was small, rustic, and perfect. A log-built porch with a rocking chair, a little wood stove inside, and a loft bedroom that smelled like cedar and fresh air. I unpacked my things slowly, setting my notebook on the desk by the window and lining up 3 pens beside it like I was preparing for something sacred. And in a way, I was. I sat down and stared at the first page. Blank. For a moment, I wondered if I had anything to say, but then the words came like a quiet stream. I started with, "My name is Winifred Prescott, and I've survived heartbreaks no mother should have to face. But I've also lived a life full of little miracles." And the story flowed. I wrote about Russell, about our early days at the shop, about the time he fixed a customer's broken record player using a bent paperclip and a prayer. I wrote about Ethan as a child, his science fair disasters, his shy smile when he passed his driver's test. I didn't start with the betrayal. I started with the love. Because that's how healing works. You don't erase the hurt, you just put it in its place. And its place is after everything else. Awesome. By the time dusk settled in and the first crickets began their songs, I had filled 7 pages. My wrist ached. but my heart felt lighter. I made a simple dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, just like I used to make for Ethan on rainy days. And as I sat on the porch sipping my tea, I thought about what Hank had said before I left. You know, Winifred, you're not just rebuilding your life, you're lighting the way for others. At the time, I brushed it off. But now, sitting here under a sky full of stars that felt like they were winking just for me, I believed it. The next morning, I went on a hike through the nearby trail, not too steep, just enough to get the blood pumping. I passed a group of retirees with walking sticks and matching windbreakers. "Good morning," one of them called cheerfully. "Morning," I smiled. First time out here, a woman with silver braids asked. "First time in a long time," I said. "You picked a good day to come back," she said knowingly. And I had. When I returned to the cabin, my phone, my new phone, had one missed call from Hank and a text that read, "Call me when you're settled. We've got news. Good news." I dialed. He answered before the first ring finished. "Winifred, I didn't mean to interrupt your retreat. You're not... I've had enough soup and soul-searching to last a week. What's the good news?" He chuckled. "Okay, get this, Peter from the bank just called me. Turns out a second escrow account exists that Robert set up under a different trust name. It was never touched." I blinked. "Another one?" "Yup, and guess what's in it?" "What?" $68,000. I had to sit down. "I guess Robert really didn't trust banks either," Hank said. I laughed. That man, always with the just-in-case fund. "It's completely yours. No access by Ethan, no risk. I'm working on transferring it to your current account." "Thank you, Hank." "Don't thank me. Thank your late husband. That man thought of everything." I stared out the cabin window at the mountain ridge in the distance, softened by mist and morning light. Robert. Even from the grave, he was still guarding me. After the call, I took out the photo I always kept tucked in my wallet. It was crinkled and a little faded, Robert and I, our heads touching. Taken the day we signed the papers on the storefront, he had a smear of machine grease on his cheek, I had lipstick on my front teeth. We looked ridiculous. "And we looked happy," I whispered. "Thank you," and tucked it back into its place. When I got back to Hueytown the next day, the air smelled like cinnamon and roasted pecans from the local bakery, and the sidewalks were dotted with pumpkins and mums. It was home, imperfect, sleepy, stubborn Hueytown. At the shop, Patty ran to the door when she saw me. "You're back. I was just about to call." I had to beat the gossip, I said with a grin. "So what's the latest?" She launched into updates. Corey had rearranged the floor layout for better foot traffic. The online orders had doubled, and we'd gotten a glowing write-up in the local paper for best customer service. Someone even brought in their great-grandmother's egg beater mixer to ask if we could refurbish it. "Did you?" I asked. "We're halfway there." I beamed. Then she added, "Also, someone came by looking for you. Tall man, kind eyes. Said his name was Miles." I froze. Miles. "He said he and Russell were army buddies. Hadn't seen you since the funeral. Left this." She handed me a folded note. Inside, in looping penmanship, "Winifred, I've moved back to the area. Would love to catch up. Lunch and a number." My heart did a funny little lurch. Not romantic, not yet. Not even maybe. Just curious, like the world wasn't quite finished surprising me. I tucked the note in my purse. After all, I still had room in my life for new chapters. And this story wasn't over yet. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I dialed the number. Miles answered on the second ring, his voice warm and deep, like aged wood. "Winifred Prescott," he said, as if he'd been waiting for this call for years. "I hear you're back in town," I replied, trying to keep the nerves out of my voice. "I am. Moved back 2 weeks ago. Town's changed, but not too much." "Well," I said, glancing out the shop window, We're all doing our best to keep it from turning into another strip mall mess. That's why I always liked Hueytown. People here still say hello on sidewalks. There was a pause. Then, would you like to grab lunch tomorrow? My treat. I agreed, of course. And that's how I found myself sitting across from Miles Reynolds at Jenny's Cafe the next day. He looked older. Of course, silver hair, a slight limp, and a kind of stillness that only comes from surviving war and life. But the smile was exactly the same. I remembered it from our front porch, when he and Russell would drink beer and laugh until their sides hurt. We talked for an hour straight, about Russell, about his travels, about how life had pulled us in different directions, only to bring us back to the same dusty corner of Alabama. "You look good, Winifred," he said, stirring his coffee. "Stronger than I expected." I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an observation. I smirked. It's both. You've been through hell, and you came out of it with grace. I tilted my head, letting his words sink in. "Well," I said, "I've learned the hard way that grace doesn't mean letting people walk all over you." He nodded, amen to that. We didn't talk about Ethan, not yet, but I sensed he knew enough. Hueytown is a small place, and gossip travels faster than a squirrel on espresso. When I returned to the store, Patty had set up a new corner near the front with refurbished vintage items, an old-school record player, a rotary phone, even a bread maker from the early 2000s that still worked like a charm. "People love nostalgia," she said. "Hands on hips, it feels like comfort food. But for your house..." She was right. There's something healing about the familiar. Maybe that's why I hadn't changed the chime on the store's front door in over 30 years. Every time it jingled. It reminded me of the day Russell and I first opened shop. A bell he'd handpicked because, as he said, it sounds like a polite hello. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail, not from Ethan, but from the county courthouse. The trial against him had wrapped. The final restitution amount was approved $75,000 plus interest. Darcy, now divorced, had fulfilled her court-ordered hours at the assisted living facility. A handwritten apology letter from her arrived with her signature at the bottom. Short and impersonal. I tucked it in the drawer without reading it again. But Ethan's restitution would take time. Years. Even, that money wasn't what I cared about now. What mattered was knowing that justice had been served, and that I was thriving after it all. One slow morning, I was rearranging the irons and slow cookers when Jenny stopped by. "Got something for you," she said, holding out a rolled-up poster. "One of my regulars volunteers at the community center. They're organizing a speaker series, want you to open it." I blinked. You've got a story people need to hear, older folks especially. Too many are dealing with what you went through, thinking they're alone. I unrolled the poster and saw my name at the bottom, Winifred Prescott Reclaiming Power After Betrayal. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. That title made me sound like a Marvel character. "Jenny, I'm not a speaker." "You're a storyteller," she corrected. "Big difference. Just get up there and do what you always do, tell it straight." The date was 3 weeks out. So I began preparing not with index cards or bullet points, but by walking the aisles of my store, remembering the milestones that had filled these shelves with meaning. Every appliance had a story. The toaster a widow bought after her husband passed, and she decided to start eating breakfast again. The blender a young woman bought to make smoothies while going through chemo. The fridge a family saved up for together, $1 at a time. The shop wasn't just retail. It was life. And that's what I wanted to speak about. Not just betrayal or resilience, but why we rebuild. Who we become after the pieces fall apart. Miles came to see me speak that night. He sat in the third row, flannel shirt and soft smile, giving me the courage to step up to that podium. I told the truth. About how Ethan and Darcy plotted to take everything from me, how they forged documents, tried to declare me unfit, how I'd lost nearly all my savings, and how I came back stronger. I spoke about trust, not the blind kind, but the earned kind, and how sometimes the people we raise don't grow into the people we hoped they'd be. It hurt to say that, but it also healed something inside me. When I finished, the applause was soft but heartfelt. Several women in the audience came up to me afterward, tears in their eyes, sharing their own stories. One whispered, "My daughter did the same thing." I never thought I could do anything about it, until now. That night, I sat in my car and cried. Not because I was broken, because I was whole. And because I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was inspiring. The next few weeks moved quietly, peacefully, in a way that felt unfamiliar at first, but welcome. My store buzzed gently with business. Miles would drop by once or twice a week with coffee and stories from his days in the Navy. And Patty had started taking more initiative with vendor negotiations. She even landed us a local deal with a new sustainable appliance company out of Asheville. It was early spring now. The breeze had that bright, grassy scent, and the dogwoods were in bloom along Main Street. I caught myself smiling more, even sleeping better. It's funny how we don't realize the weight we're carrying until someone or something sets it down for us. One morning, while restocking the rice cookers, my phone buzzed with a call from the local elementary school. A woman named Mrs. Holloway introduced herself. She ran the community outreach program and had seen the flyer from the talk I gave. "We're hosting a career day," she explained, "not just for kids, but for their parents too, to show how different professions build the fabric of a town." I nearly laughed. "Ma'am, I sell blenders and microwave ovens. I'm not sure that's going to inspire the next generation." But she insisted, "It's not about the products, Ms. Prescott. It's about how you've stayed in business for decades, adapted, and built trust in a world that's shifting beneath us. That's the kind of story they need to hear." And so, the next Friday, I found myself in a crowded gymnasium with folding chairs, makeshift banners, and rows of wiggly third graders in neon sneakers. I stood between a paramedic and a dairy farmer. When it was my turn, I didn't talk about appliances. I told them how my husband and I built something from nothing, out of grit and late nights and care. How sometimes what seems boring fixing cords, learning about coils and voltage actually keeps families running. I told them how I made mistakes, too. That I trusted people I shouldn't have, but that it's never too late to draw a line in the sand and start again. When I stepped off the stage, a boy with untied shoelaces and a gap-toothed smile ran up and said, "My grandma has a toaster from your store. She says it still works." That was enough for me. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the florist and bought a bundle of tulips, yellow ones. Russell used to say they reminded him of sunlight that grew on stems. I drove to the cemetery and stood by his grave for a while. The stone was simple, just our last name, a dash, and the years, but I swear it always felt like he was still part of the store, like his voice lingered in the humming of the mini fridges or the click of the register drawer. "Well, love," I whispered, placing the tulips down. They tried to take everything, but I didn't let them. The breeze answered softly, rustling the petals. I sat for a while, knees stiff against the grass, and thought about how grief changes over time, how it doesn't leave, it just makes room for healing, for hope, even for happiness. That weekend, Miles invited me to the spring fair out at Hollow Creek. They'd converted the old train yard into a community space, and now it hosted everything from farmers markets to bluegrass concerts. "Bring Patty, too," he said, "and wear something comfortable. There's dancing." Dancing. At my age, I almost turned him down. But that night, under strings of fairy lights and the scent of popcorn and barbecue in the air, I let him take my hand. We danced one song, just one, on the gravel dance floor, me in my best sneakers and him with that boyish grin. "You haven't changed a bit," he said. "Liar," I laughed, but I'll take it. On Monday, back at the shop, Patty handed me a manila envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Letter from a publishing agent," she said. "I might have submitted a short version of your story to a site that features inspiring older entrepreneurs. Patty." "I changed names," she added quickly, "but they want to talk to you about turning it into a profile, maybe even a book." I stared at her, stunned. "You're telling me this now? You've got a story people need to hear," she said with a shrug, and I figured, why not let more people hear it? I didn't say yes that day, but I didn't say no either. That night, I sat on my porch with a mug of chamomile, my fingers tracing the edge of the letter. I watched the sky shift from blue to ink and the stars flicker to life, one by one. It struck me then this new chapter wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't even about rebuilding. It was about becoming the kind of woman who says yes to dancing, the kind of business owner who mentors the next generation, the kind of mother who learns that love doesn't mean enabling and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, the kind of storyteller who doesn't shy away from the messy middle but lets it live right alongside the happy ending. That night, I added something to my travel list, a writing retreat in Vermont, just to try, just to see what stories I might still have in me. Because the one thing life's taught me especially lately is that the best parts usually come when you think the story's already done. The week after the spring fair, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I took a whole day off. Not a sick day, not a let Patty cover for a few hours kind of day, a real, honest-to-goodness, guilt-free day off. I turned off my store phone, put a handwritten sign on the door that said, "Gone exploring, be back tomorrow, MP," and drove up into the Smoky Mountains with nothing but a thermos of tea and a pair of hiking shoes. The trail I chose wasn't too long or steep, just enough to feel my heartbeat in my ears and my legs remind me that I'm not 30 anymore, but also not done. At the top of the ridge, the view opened into a wide valley of green, the river curving like a ribbon through the trees. I stood there for a long time, and then I laughed. Not because something was funny, but because something inside me cracked open and let the light in. Maybe it was joy, or relief, or just the realization that I had made it, that I was okay. When I came back down, there was a voicemail on my personal phone from the publishing agent Patty had mentioned. "Ms. Prescott?" the woman's voice said warmly. "We think your story could resonate with a lot of people, especially women over 50 who are reclaiming their lives. Would you consider working with a ghostwriter? We'd love to share your voice with the world." That night, I didn't answer right away. Instead, I sat down and started writing a letter. Not to the agent, not to Patty, not even to Miles. To Lloyd? I didn't plan to send it. I just needed to write it, to get it out of me. It began, "Dear Lloyd, I used to dream that you'd come back to yourself, that the boy who once beamed with pride fixing an old VCR with his dad would return. I know now he won't. I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. Because holding on to the anger only gives it more space than you deserve. But make no mistake, forgiveness is not a free pass, it's not a reset button. It's just me refusing to carry what you left behind. I hope you find peace. I hope you learn. I hope you grow. But I will not wait for you to change. I'm moving on with or without you." When I finished, I folded the paper and tucked it into the back of the photo album I had once hidden away. That chapter of my life was closed now. 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane to Japan with John and Martha. Cherry blossoms lined the sidewalks in Tokyo like pink lace. We ate ramen at 2 a.m., rode bullet trains through the countryside. I stood at the foot of Mount Fuji and felt very, very small and very, very alive. "On our last day," Martha asked, "what are you going to do next?" Winnie! I thought about it, then smiled. Write, travel, dance. Show up for people who show up for me. She nodded. You're not done yet. Back in Asheville, life returned to its quiet rhythm, but everything felt different, lighter, brighter. Patty ran the store with more confidence than ever. Our online orders had tripled. Miles and I had started meeting every Thursday night at the coffee shop for what he jokingly called board meetings, though we rarely discussed anything more strategic than pie flavors and town gossip. One Thursday, he looked across the table and said, "You've changed, Winnie." Better or worse? He shrugged. Braver. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote the first few pages of my book. Not a memoir, exactly, just stories about life, loss, grit, and starting over when everyone else thinks your story's already written. I titled it The Second Wind. The last line read, "You can't go back and undo the storm, but you can rebuild with stronger walls, wider windows, and a garden out front that blooms like hell every spring." Because that's what I had done. I had lost. I had been betrayed. And I had grown back stronger. They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose how you let them shape you. And I chose to become more, not less, because of what I survived. If you're listening to this and thinking you're too old to start again, too worn out to fight back, or too afraid to speak up, I want you to hear this loud and clear. It's never too late. Not to change, not to leave, not to live, and certainly not to bloom. Tonight's journey has come to a close, but if you're still here listening in the quiet, let me whisper something important. You are not alone. Whether you're watching this in a dim bedroom at 2:17 a.m. or listening from a cozy porch swing at sunset, this story wasn't just about one woman, it was about resilience, about reclaiming dignity, about the slow, soft strength that comes from knowing your own worth after years of being told you're too old, too emotional, too much. Winnie Prescott's story may be fictional, but her courage is very, very real. It lives in the hands of every woman who runs her own small business, in every heart that says no more to mistreatment, in every soul who packs a suitcase and boards a plane for the first time at 63. Life doesn't end when the kids move out, or when someone disappoints you, or when you're forced to start again. Sometimes it's only just beginning. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of something uncertain like Winnie, did know that you can step forward, that the road might be winding, but there is light, there is laughter. There is another version of you just waiting to emerge. Thank you for sharing this story with me tonight. If it moved you or gave you strength, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales like this, stories that soften the heart, stir the soul, and remind us that it's never too late to bloom. Sleep well, and until next time, good night.